120 degrees by noon.
Wow.
At night, though, it was about 75, 80, and that was good for me because I actually was on the night shift most of the time. It was still, I like heat though, and it was funny because where we lived, it was extremely inside, extremely air conditioned. So it's like going from 120 to 70 almost instantly. But during the day, it was a really dry heat. The best comparison I can give you is if you put a hairdryer on high and held it right up to your face, so if the wind blew a little bit, that's exactly what it felt like most of the time. But that wasn't actually the worst part of it. Kuwait, we got into Kuwait before we went into Iraq. That was about a little less high in the temperature range, it was about 105, 100, but you didn't feel that. It was extremely humid.
Okay.
It was super saturated. I think they said it was like 120% or something ridiculous like that. It was all the water coming off the Gulf, and you literally stepped outside for a second or two, and it felt like you had been sweating the whole time. You were literally wet after 3 steps.
That's got to be uncomfortable a little bit.
Yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable. That was actually worse than Iraq, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
I heard that there were a lot of sandstorms out in Iraq. Did that affect any of the operations there?
Yeah, and I actually had to brief some, particularly on that, brief generals and colonels and all that on that stuff as part of the weather, that sandstorms, depending on their severity, shut down operations. We couldn't move any people, certain vehicles we couldn't drive. It was just too dangerous. And it wasn't very, very bad in Baghdad, but you get out a little bit in the towns where it really affects you, then yeah. Sometimes we had to change up our uniform, and I would actually recommend to the commander, soldiers to wear goggles, wear this, and it did change depending on the day. We didn't get that like you would see on the news all the time, but it was every few weeks or so you felt it. So.
Now, you mentioned that when these sandstorms were happening, you couldn't transport certain vehicles, you couldn't use certain vehicles. What was the main mode of transportation?
Well, it depends on the mission of what you were doing. Our particular mission for our unit was inside the wire, but believe it or not, we used a version of an up-armored bus, and this was for transporting not just soldiers, but detainees that we were guarding. And the windows weren't like the windshields like you find on a car here in America. They weren't like slanted and sloped. They were like straightforward, up and down windows, and it was, it got kind of hard to see. A lot of times the driver would kind of go by feel, and occasionally you would nick a corner of a building. It just happened, and hopefully it didn't do too much damage to the vehicle, but it definitely affected some of the transportation operations we had.
Okay. What was some of the gear that you needed on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, for us, because of where we worked, it was, we didn't have to do full armor the whole time. We were mostly in what I'm wearing here with our weapon and a patrol cap. Looks like the baseball cap version of what we wear. And depending on what you did, you had different things. Like, for example, if the bombing siren went off around, we were right next to an Air Force base, and that was a really loud siren. This base was, 10 miles or so away, and you would still hear this siren like blaring. If like that went off or we got an alert for that, we'd have to put on our full armor, our Kevlar helmet, and stay in that until we were given the all clear sign. So usually that didn't happen too often. Every so often it did, but mostly it was just this, our weapon, and protective eyewear.
Okay, so that would be the only things you needed for special occasion, was that helmet and so your full armor?
Yes.
Okay. What was your schedule like on for a normal day?
Normal day for what our mission was, we had 12-hour shifts, and that was 6 days a week, and we tried to rotate it with 1 day off. Problem is, you need X number of soldiers to fulfill the mission, so sometimes when soldiers went on leave and there weren't as many in the area, or somewhere in medical or whatever, you didn't get that day off. So we were going like 12 hours on and off. And it mostly, if you had a day shift, it felt like almost a typical work day. And it became a little bit exhausting afterwards, but once you fell into the routine, it was better. At night, things were a lot quieter, if you can imagine, and for me, I like the nights. So the 12-hour shift was a little better, but it was weird because like you'd see your buddies coming in off of their shift, going to my shift. I got up and actually ate breakfast when dinner was
being served.
What was weird about that is it was literally the same time almost as in America when we would actually eat breakfast.
Oh, so your internal schedule is kind of the same then.
Kind of, except the fact that it was about the light. So like
Yeah.
the light kind of signified day, night, obviously, and it was weird having to come in and eat breakfast as everyone else was eating
Yeah.
dinner, and sometimes we ate the dinner version of food. So
So for your breakfast, you might have chicken parm instead of having a bowl of Wheaties.
yes.
Okay. What did you miss most about home?
Probably the lack of social life. It was just this. It wasn't horrible over there, but it was just like the same thing, every single day, day in, day out. You almost wanted something exciting to happen. I mean, but it's war, so you really don't want that to happen. But it was just the same thing. What I miss about over here is about just being able to go out and just hang with friends. I mean, just simple things like that. Being able to sleep in your own bed.
Yeah.
Like little things like that is probably what soldiers missed most.
Now, what was the housing situation like? Were you in a tent? Were you in a barrack building?
We were in barracks. It was an actual building, and we had beds, we had desks, we had wall lockers, we had air conditioning in the building, and it was funny because it's so different from wars we had before, and we had amenities. First thing, my roommate and I, who was my age at the time, 23, former college students. First thing we did is the unit we replaced is we went up to them and said, "Hey, are you guys getting rid of the TVs that you were using and everything?" So we had 2 TVs in our room. We had a PlayStation 3 that my roommate got shipped from home.
Wow.
We had those were, and we had a bunch of DVDs, of course. We had pretty good amenities when we were off shift. I mean, but again, that was cool after 1 week. But then it was like the same.
What
thing.
else is there to do? It's the same routine. Now, you're saying that you had a little bit of free time and you watched some movies, you played some games. What else did you do? Did you have to train at all while there?
Yeah, we had mandatory briefs. We had to go to briefs for about law stuff, as we call it, JAG, Judge Advocate General stuff. Saying you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. And that was kind of get over the Abu Ghraib syndrome. Actually, the camp I was at was called Camp Remembrance 2. Camp Remembrance 1 was Abu Ghraib. Not many people know that. And so we had to go to that brief, and our soldiers did a really good job of adhering to that and fulfilling the mission, keeping detainees safe, guarding them, respecting them, all that. Some things we did in our off time to sew up the hours is we actually started flag football. And we got shirts made up and everything and did flag football. That was under the first unit who was in charge of us. The second unit some guys got hurt, so they said that's not a good idea, don't do it anymore. Most of the soldiers, including myself, kind of disagreed with that because it kept morale up.
Yeah, really.
And it was like, yeah, it's football. Some people are going to cut some bruises here and there. It wasn't anything really serious. But there was basketball courts.
So there was other physical activities.
There was things to do. A lot of guys ran, biked. There was like a Harley Davidson shop that you could
really?
go to. Yeah,
Very
people
cool.
actually buy motorcycles overseas. Some did, and it was. You could find things to do, and of course the other one just sleep. So.
Get rest. Now, I'm looking at your uniform, and real quick before we get into our next segment, could you explain to me the patch that you have here on your shoulder and the one that you have straight center?
This one is first lieutenant rank, single bar. Like the next rank up with captain, there'll be 2 versions of this, thicker, with little connecting things called the railroad tracks.
Okay.
If this was gold, it'd be 1 rank lower, it'd be second lieutenant. That's what it was before this. We have the rank here, and on our caps, we'd also have the ranks, and that's for officers. If you see anyone with like chevrons, like little V's kind of curving up with little rockers under it, those would be the sergeants.
Okay.
And the patches, we have the American flag on the right side. Notice that it is facing backwards, and that's for the mirrors and all that, the purpose of that. Over here, we have the 50th Brigade Combat Team patch, and it's a shield. It used to be a half rainbow. A lot of jokes made out of that, but the half rainbow represented a World War I patch where a lot of soldiers from all different nations for Europe and the U.S. came under one command, and then they got, during various battles, the unit lost half their manpower, KIA, killed. So the commander cut off half the rainbow as a personification of that. It recently changed in the last few years to this 3-star and a shield. The left side is the patch that is the unit you're with.
Okay.
And this is the 50th Brigade Combat Team, and that's pretty much New Jersey National Guard.
Okay.
I have the same thing on the right side, and any patch on the right side signifies a combat patch. So this is who I deployed under.
So that's who you were in combat with.
Yes, this is the patch that you would wear, and I wear it over here too, saying this guy's been a combat
Okay.
area.